Most people dream of success, but they do not succeed because dreaming is easy. Doing is not, especially doing what is hard. Stoic philosophy reminds you that your future will not be found in what is easy, but in what is difficult. You are not built by comfort, you are built by choosing discomfort deliberately. Every day you are offered a decision. Will I stay where it's easy, or move where it's meaningful? Most choose ease because ease feels safe. But safety without purpose is a silent prison. Those who change the world are those who step into resistance, into failure, into uncertainty. Not because they enjoy pain, but because they understand growth only lives on the other side of difficulty. So you must ask yourself, what have you been avoiding? What hard thing have you postponed because it demands more than you feel ready to give? That is your path. The truth is, you are not too weak. You are just too practiced at avoiding challenge. You were not made to be average, but average is the consequence of choosing comfort one day at a time. And every day you choose again. Stoic philosophy teaches that greatness is not found in grand gestures, but in the quiet repetition of doing what is hard, even when no one sees, especially when no one sees, because that's when it counts. When you're tired, when you feel behind, when your doubts scream loud, and you still choose to keep going. That is how you separate from the crowd, not with talent, but with tenacity. Not with luck, but with discipline. Not with perfect timing, but with imperfect effort delivered relentlessly. The fire in your mind must be stronger than the fatigue in your body. You must stop waiting for the right mood and start choosing the right move, again and again and again, because every time you choose to do what others refuse, you move forward. You build something they cannot see but will one day feel. Your consistency, your resilience, your presence. These are not born. They are forged through effort, like steel hammered in fire. And fire comes from friction between where you are and where you're going. So do not fear the fire, step into it. This is the path of the few. Most will not walk it. They will stay behind and tell stories about what could have been. But not you. You were not meant to stay soft, to stay safe, to stay small. You were meant to expand, to evolve, to lead. And leadership begins with self-leading yourself into the hard places, into the daily choices that build your future. Brick by brick, you will want to quit, you will want to hide, you will want to take the easy road. But that road leads nowhere. Your path requires cost, and the cost is discipline, doing what is hard until it becomes who you are. Comfort is not your friend. It feels warm, but it rots your potential. It feels kind, but it quietly kills everything strong in you. Comfort doesn't announce itself as danger. It shows up as rest, as convenience, as the soft voice that says you've done enough, take it easy. And slowly you start to believe it. You postpone your goals, you negotiate your standards, you lower your urgency until one day you wake up unchanged and wonder where the time went. Comfort is a thief, a silent one. It steals your edge, your discipline, your clarity, and it replaces them with excuses, with distraction, with softness. Stoic philosophy warns against this subtle danger, because comfort feels innocent, but growth is never born where nothing is required of you. You grow because something pushes you to expand, to rise, to sharpen, and nothing sharpens you when you stay comfortable. You cannot become stronger in a life that demands nothing. You must leave the soft room and enter the arena. Not because it's easy, but because it is required. Every dream that matters is on the other side of challenge, and the longer you wait for it to feel good, the further you drift from your mission, from your vision, from your identity. Because deep down you were not made for average, and yet average is exactly where comfort leads. Slowly, quietly, without resistance, you settle. You compromise, you soften, until you forget what it feels like to chase something real. But you can remember, not in thought, but in action, one choice: to return to the hard path, to reject ease and reclaim excellence. Excellence is not a gift, it is a decision, to say, I will not stay where it is. Soft, I will go where I am required to stretch, to bleed, to break, and then rise. Comfort never made anyone great. Pressure did, discipline did, sacrifice did. You must love the discomfort. Not because it feels good, but because it makes you someone you're proud of. And pride, not ego, but self-respect comes from knowing. You chose to do what others avoid. You chose to push when it was easier to pause. You chose to keep going when quitting was the softer path. This is where strength is forged, not in one act, but in daily decisions to stay in the fire just a little longer. To train when you're tired to speak with, discipline when you want to react to rise when staying down is justified. These small choices shape your character, and character, not comfort, is what will carry you through the darkest seasons. So stop worshiping ease. Ease makes you soft and soft doesn't. Last, Stoic philosophy teaches to harden the mind to simplify the path to confront what is difficult, instead of decorating what is easy. And when you live this way, your world changes, not because it becomes easier, but because you become stronger. Comfort will still whisper, but you will no longer listen because you have seen what it costs, and you will not pay that price again. Comfort is not your friend. It feels warm, but it rots your potential. It feels kind, but it quietly kills everything strong in you. Comfort doesn't announce itself as danger. It shows up as rest, as convenience, as the soft voice that says you've done enough, take it easy. And slowly, you start to believe it. You postpone your goals. You negotiate your standards. You lower your urgency until one day you wake up unchanged and wonder where the time went. Comfort is a thief, a silent one. It steals your edge, your discipline, your clarity, and it replaces them with excuses, with distraction, with softness. Stoic philosophy warns against this subtle danger because comfort feels innocent, but growth is never born where nothing is required of you. You grow because something pushes you to expand, to rise, to sharpen, and nothing sharpens you when you stay comfortable. You cannot become stronger. In a life that demands nothing, you must leave the soft room and enter the arena, not because it's easy, but because it is required. Every dream that matters is on the other side of challenge, and the longer you wait for it to feel good, the further you drift from your mission, from your vision, from your identity, because you know deep down you were not made for average, and yet average is exactly where comfort leads, slowly, quietly, without resistance. You settle, you compromise, you soften, until you forget what it feels like to chase something real. But you can remember, not in thought but in action, one choice to return to the hard path, to reject ease and reclaim excellence. Excellence is not a gift. It is a decision to say, I will not stay where it is soft. I will go where I am required to stretch, to bleed, to break, and then rise. Comfort never made anyone great. Pressure did, discipline did, sacrifice did. You must love the discomfort, not because it feels good, but because it makes you someone you're proud of. And pride, not ego, but self-respect, comes from knowing you chose to do what others avoid. You chose to push when it was easier to pause. You chose to keep going when quitting was the softer path. This is where strength is forged, not in one act, but in daily decisions to stay in the fire just a little longer. To train when you're tired, to speak with discipline when you want to react, to rise when staying down is justified. These small choices shape your character, and character, not comfort, is what will carry you through the darkest seasons. So stop worshiping easies, makes you soft, and soft doesn't last. Stoic philosophy teaches to harden the mind, to simplify the path, to confront what is difficult instead of decorating what is easy. And when you live this way, your world changes. Not because it becomes easier, but because you become stronger. Comfort will still whisper, but you will no longer listen, because you have seen what it costs, and you will not pay that price again. You will not find yourself in comfort. You will not find yourself in praise and ease and quiet days. You find yourself in the storm, in the moments you want to run, but choose to remain, in the pain that strips away your masks, in the silence that demands truth. This is where identity is born, not chosen, but discovered. You do not become by declaring who you are. You become by walking through fire and realizing you're still standing. Stoic philosophy teaches that the real self is not built in imagination, but in adversity. The man who has never been tested does not yet know what lives inside him. He may hope, he may plan, he may declare, but it is only when pressure comes and the old frameworks break that something deeper has a chance to emerge. Because fear is not the enemy. It is the gate. The gate between the version of you that you've known and the version you were meant to meet. But most men avoid that gate. They stop at the first sign of resistance. They turn back at the first shadow of fear. Because fear feels final, because discomfort feels like failure. But Stoic philosophy reminds you discomfort is not danger. It is designed to peel back what is no longer useful. designed to invite you into a deeper strength. And you must accept that invitation. Not with emotion, but with resolve. Walk toward what you've avoided. Do what is hard, not because you like it, but because you trust who you will become in the process. Every challenge reveals a part of you that ease could never touch, and the deeper the challenge, the clearer the revelation. You don't need to create identity, you need to reveal it. And revelation comes when everything comfortable is stripped away, when no one is watching, when no one is helping, when the old tools don't work and all you have is your breath, your will, and your word. That is when you meet yourself. Not the self that is presented, but the self that has endured. And that self is always stronger than you thought. You just never gave him a reason to rise. Give yourself that reason now by doing what is hard, by walking through what scares you, by stepping into the pressure not to prove anything, but to refine everything. Because fear loses its power when you stop flinching, and identity gains its weight when it is forged, not in what you wish, but in what you withstand. So don't fear the test, welcome it. It is not here to destroy you. It is here to introduce you to the man you've been running from. The man who does not collapse, who does not explain, who does not wait to be rescued, but builds himself in the quiet while the world doubts. You may not like it, but you need it. You need the challenge to pull out what is buried. You need the pressure to awaken what is dormant. You need the hardship to remind you that your peace is not found in the absence of problems, but in your presence when they arrive. And that presence only comes when you stop avoiding what you were built to face. This is where you find yourself, not where it's easy, but where it's necessary. The strongest man is not the one who feels no fear. It is the one who acts despite it, because fear is not the problem. It is the excuse we use to avoid becoming who we are meant to be. Stoic philosophy teaches that fear is not a signal to stop, but a signal to focus, to breathe deeper, to move slower, to go forward anyway. Most people believe they must first eliminate fear before they begin. But if you wait for fear to leave, you will wait forever. Fear never fully leaves, it adapts, it disguises it, finds new reasons to hold you back. And that is why you must stop listening. You don't silence fear by negotiating with it. You silence it by proving through your actions that it no longer leads. And that proof is not in what you say, but in what you do in the face of fear. The fear of failure, of judgment, of being seen, of being wrong, of being alone. These are the ghosts that follow every man who dares to build something real. But those ghosts only hold power over the man who stops walking. The man who keeps going renders them powerless. Not by pretending they don't exist, but by refusing to let them decide what comes next. This is what makes you strong. Not the absence of fear, but the discipline to walk through it. You fear public speaking, then speak. You fear discipline, then commit. You fear being seen, then show up. You do not run, you respond with calm, with courage, with presence. Because your future will be defined by what you did when fear tried to stop you, and most men never get that far. They stop at the edge of uncertainty. But that edge is not the end, it is the beginning. Of becoming, of breaking through. Your next level is always on the other side of something you're afraid of. And you already know what it is. That one conversation, that one commitment, that one change you've delayed, not because it's impossible, but because it's uncomfortable. But Stoic philosophy says, the discomfort is the reason to move, not the reason to wait. The hard thing is the right thing, because it refines, because it sharpens, because it clarifies. You want to build confidence, then walk through fear over and over until it can no longer follow you. Not because you became fearless, but because you became focused. You gave your energy to the mission, not the emotion. And that shift is everything. You stop asking, how do I feel? You start asking, what must I do? And then you do it. Not because it's easy, but because it's required to become the man who can carry weight without collapsing, who can feel fear without following it, who can lead himself even in darkness. This is the quiet power of doing what is hard, and it begins when you stop waiting for fear to leave, and instead decide to walk with it without letting it speak. You no longer need to fight fear, you need to outlast it. And that is what you will do, one step, one breath, one deliberate act at a time. You think freedom is doing what you want when you want, but that is not freedom. That is impulse, and impulse is not power. It is slavery to mood, to emotion, to weakness disguised as liberty. Real freedom comes from structure, from discipline, from the choice To do what is hard because it is right. Stoic philosophy reminds you that freedom is not the removal of all rules. It is the alignment with rules that serve your future. You want to feel free? Then live in such a way that your mind respects your choices. Wake when you said you would train. When you said you would finish what you start even when no one is watching. This is where freedom lives, in the quiet of self-respect. Because when you live this way, you stop negotiating with your own doubt. You stop performing for others. You stop carrying the shame of promises broken to yourself. And that is the heaviest weight of all, the weight of knowing you've been avoiding your own standard. But you can put that down, not with guilt, but with effort. Choose again. Act again. Move forward again. Not because you feel free, but because you are becoming free. Freedom is the ability to follow through on what you know matters, to say no to distraction and mean it, to say yes to the hard thing and do it. This is where liberation begins. You are not here to escape pressure. You are here to use it. Pressure is not the enemy. It is the reminder that something important is being asked of you. And if you listen, if you step forward into that pressure with clarity and discipline, you discover a new kind of power. Not the kind that needs to be seen, but the kind that cannot be shaken, because it is built not on comfort, but on command. You command your time. You command your choices. You command your focus. And in doing so, you reclaim the hours you once gave away to excuses, to impulses, to delay. Freedom is not the absence of effort. Freedom is being able to choose the hard thing without fear, and to do it again and again until it becomes who you are. You are not born free. You are born capable. Freedom is something you earn by mastering yourself. And self-mastery is only found in the deliberate decision to do what is hard when no one forces you, because you understand that the easy road is a lie. It costs more than it gives. And the hard road, though steep, though lonely, though painful, is the one that leaves you with something real: dignity, direction, peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need noise to be felt, because it lives in the way you carry yourself. You no longer move because of pressure. You move because of principle. You no longer need permission. You move because it's time, and in that motion, you are free. Peace is not the absence of hardship. Peace is what you learn when you walk through hardship and remain calm. The world will shake the path, will narrow, the storm will come, and in that chaos you will either break or become still. Stoic philosophy teaches that true peace is not found when things go right. It is found in who you are when things fall apart. You become calm, not because life is easy, but because you've trained your mind to not be shaken. You've taught yourself to see clearly, to breathe deeply, to stand still when others run. This stillness is not passive, it is powerful. Because in the middle of uncertainty, the one who stays composed leads. The one who doesn't flinch decides, directs, commands. And you can be that man, not because you never fear, but because you never follow fear. Not because you never feel doubt, but because you never serve it. You've learned that the emotion is allowed, but it is not in charge. You've learned that calm is not a mood, it is a discipline, trained through doing what is hard over and over until your system no longer panics at discomfort, until your breath remains steady under pressure, until your mind remains clear in uncertainty. And that training only happens in challenge. You do not become calm by reading about peace. You become calm by walking through the fire and learning not to react. When others complain, you adjust. When others freeze, you move. When others break, you hold. Not because you are special, but because you have practice. You have practice showing up without emotion. You have practice speaking truth without fear. You have practice keeping pace when the world pushes you to hurry. And now you do not waver. Your strength is not in what you say, but in what you no longer chase. You no longer chase validation, attention, or control. You simply act with presence. You show up in alignment with what you believe, not what you feel. And in that you find real freedom. The freedom to stay grounded in the middle of the whirlwind. The freedom to keep your soul centered while your plans collapse, because you've learned to let go of what doesn't matter. You've learned that chaos cannot reach the man who no longer fears it. The world will not stop shaking, but you can stop shaking by choosing to meet life with stillness, with courage, with a quiet, unshakable center. This is not built in comfort. This is not built by luck, it is built in the early mornings. You did the work when no one knew. In the lonely nights you stayed the course. Without applause, in the middle of failure you did not collapse. And now your presence speaks. Without volume, without noise. It speaks in how you walk, how you breathe, how you no longer panic at life. You simply meet it, calm, composed, and certain, because you have learned that what is hard is not here to break you, it is here to shape you. And you have been shaped well. Every man meets a breaking point, that invisible line where the body shakes, the mind screams, and the soul feels like quitting, where the excuses start to make sense and the reasons to continue feel too far away. This is the place where most turn back. They tell themselves it's not the right time, that it wasn't meant to be, that life is asking too much. But Stoic philosophy teaches something different. It teaches that the breaking point is not the end. It is the beginning. Not the edge of collapse, but the doorway to everything real, because nothing worth keeping is found before the breaking point. Peace is on the other side. Strength is on the other side. Self-respect is on the other side. But you don't get there unless you go through the pain, through the silence, through the voice in your head that tells you to stop. And in that moment when everything feels too heavy, you make the decision that separates you. You continue. Not because it's easy, not because it feels good, but because you said you would, and that means something now. You've built a different kind of man, the kind who doesn't need someone watching to stay the course. The kind who doesn't collapse just because it got difficult. The kind who has trained himself to walk through the noise, through the fatigue, through the fear. You know, the breaking point is not a threat. It is a test not of talent, but of resolve. And resolve does not live in the body. It lives in the mind, in the decision to keep showing up when every part of you wants to run. You breathe, you slow down, you plant your feet and move. Not with speed, but with clarity. Because you are not here to impress, you are here to endure. And endurance is rare. Most want the shortcut, the strategy, the comfort. But you have chosen the path that builds something real, and real strength only emerges after the point where most give up. You earn it in sweat, in silence, in solitude. When you keep going after you thought you couldn't. And when you reach that place, you realize something. You didn't break, you bent, you cracked, but you didn't fold in from that pressure. You've become something. The old version of you couldn't imagine. You've become stable. Your mind no longer fragile, your word no longer soft, your focus no longer temporary, because you've lived through what breaks most and stayed calm, rooted, present. And now that moment is no longer something you fear, it is something you remember. The moment you could have quit but didn't, and that will echo through everything you do, your relationships, your work, your posture, your presence. People won't know what you've walked through, but they will feel that you've walked through something and survived, because it shows in your calm, in your certainty, in your silence. This is who you are now. Not the man who hopes, but the man who chooses not. The man who avoids, but the man who continues. This is what Stoic philosophy was always preparing you for. To meet the breaking point with stillness. To meet the hard moment with decision, and to walk away not as the same man, but as the one who stayed. Maturity is not measured by what you say, but by what you do when the feeling is gone. When the high fades, when no one is watching. When the fire inside dims to a flicker. This is where most people stop. They say, I lost motivation. I don't feel it anymore. But Stoic philosophy does not care about how you feel. It cares about what you choose, because real power is not found in excitement but in consistency. You do not need to feel inspired. You need to feel responsible to your mission, to your process, to the man you are becoming. And responsibility doesn't wait for energy or mood or weather. It shows up on cold mornings, on quiet days, on long nights. Because discipline is not emotional. It is directional. It asks one thing, what must be done, and then it does. Head with or without applause, with or without clarity, with or without motivation. This is what separates the man from the boy. The boy waits to feel ready. The man moves because it's time. You are not called to do what's easy. You are called to do what's required. And that often means waking up tired and moving anyway. Feeling doubt and choosing action anyway. Not because you love the struggle, but because you've learned that the struggle is the doorway to something real. Motions come and go, but character is built on what remains when they leave. When you still honor your word, when you still keep your promises, when you still rise. That is where identity is forged, not in the highs, but in the habits, not in the fire, but in the ashes you want to grow. Then, stop waiting for ideal conditions. Stop needing a reason to do what you already said you would do. Let your word mean more than your emotions. Let your habits lead your feelings, not the other way around. This is emotional maturity. Not that you never feel weak, but that you no longer obey that weakness. You feel it, you acknowledge it, you nod at it, and then you continue. Because your mission is greater than your mood, and your path is deeper than your current energy. Stoic philosophy trains you to rise, without force to return, without dramato, move with quiet force day after day until movement becomes identity, until you no longer need to think about action. You simply act. You no longer chase, you embody. You no longer seek fire, you become the furnace. This is the man who lasts, the one who walks not for applause but for alignment, who keeps going not for pride but for principle, who stays disciplined, not because it feels good, but because it's who he is. And when others burn out, he still walks. Not faster, not louder, but steady. This is the gift of choosing action without emotion. You build a rhythm the world cannot interrupt, a focus life cannot shake, a presence you do not borrow from anyone, because it was built in silence, in repetition, in truth. You do not build self-respect by being seen, you build it by being consistent in the dark, doing what is right when no one is watching, when no one is clapping, when no one will ever know. This is where it starts. Not in achievement, but in alignment, not in recognition, but in rhythm. The man who respects himself does not need reminders. He moves because he said he would. He follows through because it's who he is. And that kind of identity is not given. It is built slowly, deliberately, quietly. You wake up, you do the work, you protect your energy, you guard your time, you speak with clarity, you live with weight even when no one is looking. Because self-respect is not a result. It is a mirror. You must face every night when the noise fades, and the truth remains. Did I live today according to what I know or according to what was easy? Did I bend or did I hold? Did I drift or did I decide? These questions form the foundation of how you see yourself, and how you see yourself shapes how you move. In every room, in every relationship, in every battle, you do not need to win loudly, you need to walk cleanly. And a clean walk comes from choosing integrity over image, from choosing discipline over drama, from choosing values over validation. Most people are still chasing how they are seen. But Stoic philosophy asks you, how are you when no one sees? Can you live according to your code when no one asks you to? Can you carry weight when no one thanks you for it? Can you return to the path after failure? Not for applause, but for alignment. If the answer is yes, you have earned something rare. You have earned your own respect, and that will change everything. Because when you respect yourself, you no longer fear other people's judgment. You no longer compromise to fit, you no longer shrink to be accepted. You simply stand calm, clear, unshakable. Not because the world is soft, but because you are solid. And that solidity comes from those invisible decisions no one ever sees. The workouts you do alone, the tasks you finish in silence, the conversations you choose not to escalate, the temptations you choose to walk past. Each one adds weight to your presence, not flashy, not loud, but real. And real always lasts longer than performance. You want peace, then stop pretending. You want power, then stop performing. You want self-respect, then stop negotiating with the part of you that wants comfort more than truth. This is how you change. You stop doing it for them and start doing it for the man in the mirror. Not because he's perfect, but because he's becoming someone you can trust, and that trust will carry you further than any compliment ever could. You do not need applause to stay committed. You do not need recognition to stay consistent. You only need a reason that is real, and once you have it, you walk with or without approval, with or without momentum, with or without company, because Stoic philosophy teaches this truth, that the strongest man is not the one who moves fastest, but the one who moves longest in the same direction. He does not need noise. He needs rhythm. He does not seek to impress. He seeks to endure. Because endurance is where transformation lives, and one can sprint for a week, and one can burn hot for a month, but few will walk quietly for years. And those few become unshakable, because their movement is not emotional, it is foundational. They built their life on principles, not preference. They act because it's who they are, not because it feels good. And that is what makes them free. You want freedom, then stay the course. Not when it's convenient, but when it's tested. Not when people cheer, but when they forget. Not when you feel strong, but especially when you don't. Because consistency doesn't come from always being at your best. It comes from choosing not to disappear when you're not. You show up at 60%, you show up at 40%. You still move, you still think, you still lead yourself, and slowly something changes. You stop relying on inspiration. You start living by instruction. The instruction you gave yourself, the standard you chose to live by. Not because anyone asked you, but because you decided you were worth following. This is what separates you. You no longer start things just to feel good. You finish because it matters. You hold the line, not because it's easy, but because it's right, and that line may be invisible to others. They won't see how hard it was to stay consistent. They won't feel what it took to not give up, but you will know, and that knowing will shape you. You become a presence, someone who doesn't shift with emotion, with trends, with noise. You stay in the work, in the discipline, in the direction you chose, and over time the world will see the results, but by then you won't need them to, because the result already lives in you. It lives in the calm you walk with, in the certainty you carry, in the patience you've earned through doing what is hard long enough that it became natural. This is the quiet power of staying consistent, and it does not require praise, it only requires your decision to remain. Quietness is not weakness, it is the sound of someone who has nothing left to prove, because the man who has walked through storms no longer needs to shout over the wind. He simply moves with weight, not loud but undeniable. This is what Stoic philosophy teaches, that real power doesn't need volume. Real confidence doesn't need display. Real strength is not found in noise, but in stillness. When you've been tested enough times, you stop performing. You stop reacting. You stop rushing. You begin to move. With intention, you begin to listen more than you speak. You begin to breathe through chaos instead of fighting it. Not because you don't feel it, but because you've learned. You don't need to fight every battlesome storms you walk through with calm eyes and steady feet. Because you know who you are now, you don't need to defend it, you don't need to explain it. Your life speaks louder than your voice ever could, and that life was built in silence. In the early mornings you showed up when no one watched, in the lonely hours you kept going when everyone else stopped, in the setbacks you learned to hold instead of collapse. And over time you became something that doesn't shake when the world does. You became still when you're misunderstood, still when you're challenged, still when you're underestimated. Because stillness is not the absence of fire. It is fire under control, it is discipline embodied, and people will not always understand it. They will mistake your silence for weakness, your stillness for indecision, your calm for complacency. But you know the truth. You are not hiding, you are watching. You are not uncertain, you are choosing. You are not silent. You are speaking in a language only the disciplined understand. And in that silence you grow. You grow because you're not distracted by noise, by approval, by reaction. You're focused on what matters, the work, the integrity, the internal alignment. And when that alignment is strong, you no longer need to move fast. You move deeply. You no longer need to prove you practice. You no longer need to be seen. You become solid, and that solidity outlasts everything else. The trends fade, the noise burns out. But the man who has trained his stillness remains, not above the world, but rooted in, able to stand while others fall, able to breathe while others panic, able to choose while others react. This is what real strength looks like. Not raised fists, but lowered shoulders. Not control over others, but mastery of self. Not endless movement, but the right movement at the right time from the right center. And that center was earned, not given, earned by walking through what you used to run from. Earned by learning that silence is not absence. It is presence with nothing to prove. You do not live to be known. You live to be grounded, because being known is temporary, being solid is forever. You do not need to be famous. You need to be unshakable. That is the difference between the man who performs and the man who endures. The man who performs lives for moments. The man who endures lives for meaning. And Stoic philosophy is not a life of show. It is a life of structure, built in silence, anchored in values, carried with weight. The kind of life that doesn't crumble when plans fail. or people leave or storms arrive because it was never built on applause, it was built on principle. You wake up, you act, you repeat. Not because anyone asked, but because you decided that you are worth being loyal to. Your path is no longer about success. It is about stability. You are no longer chasing feelings, you are cultivating foundation. And foundation takes time, pressure, and solitude. You may not be seen, but you will be strong. You may not be celebrated, but you will be centered. You may not be understood, but you will be certain of your code, certain of your choices, certain of your steps. Not perfect but deliberate, not flawless but faithful. And faithfulness to a path long after the excitement fades is what separates those who wander from those who lead you now. Lead not with your voice but with your presence, not with declarations but with decisions, not with followers but with footsteps taken daily in alignment with who you are becoming. And that becoming is not rushed, it is refined. You are no longer building just a result. You are building a rhythm, a stillness, a standard, one that will carry you through this season and every season after, because you've learned that peace is not in the outcome but in the approach. And you approach life, now not with noise but with quiet certainty. You do not fear failure because failure does not break a man who cannot be moved. You do not fear loss because you have already let go of everything not essential. You do not fear time because your time is spent in truth, and that truth echoes in how you show up, with calm, with control, with clarity. You have become a living example of what Stoic philosophy offers, a man who needs nothing but gives everything. A man who walks not to be admired, but to be aligned, a man who is free, not because he avoids hardship, but because he is no longer owned by it. This is your life now, not loud but lasting, not famous but firm, not impressive but unshakable. And that is more than enough. That is legacy.